I'll just make the announcement. Then good evening to all the participants. I welcome you on behalf of Madras Tax Bar. Uh, Today we have amongst us Mr. Akshay Agarwal, who is practicing for the last 2 years in Sapal Law Associates, junior of Sengotovan sir. So today he has chosen to speak on tax versus IBC, another very interesting topic. So we are looking forward in hearing from Akshay. So after Akshay finishes presentations, we can have our own discussion rounds where uh, you can raise your hands in the app, or you can just send a message in the chat box, and you'll get your chance to have a you can put your points also in place. So thank you once again for all to join us today, and we're looking forward in hearing from you, Akshay. Uh, Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prithvi. Uh, Good evening, audience. My name is Akshay Agarwal, as already introduced by Prithvi. Today, I would be speaking on the topic tax versus IBC. This dispute has been it has been ever long going, and this conundrum has been still existing regarding a lot of issues. Lot of courts, lot of tribunals have dealt upon this issue, or basically various aspects of this issue, and they have laid down legal precedents. Some aspects have been settled by the courts. Some aspects have still not been settled by the courts, and they are still a gray area. So I have chosen this topic because there are a lot of issues which still are hovering around, and they have still not been settled by the courts. Broadly, what I would be covering in this presentation is IBC coming in the way of tax authorities. This presentation, I have divided into four subtopics, wherein the first being where I will be discussing about, first and foremost, tax dues being an operational debt or not. The second subtopic which I will be discussing is what happens to the tax dues which arises before the initiation of the CIRP. Then the third topic is tax dues which arises during the period of liquidation. And then finally to the topic which is basically an inconsistency which is still existing within the code. Moving towards my first topic, whether tax dues are operational debt or not. This question comes up a lot of times, and the question comes up with respect to tax dues being operational debt because tax dues obviously cannot be financial debt. The legal position regarding this issue has been settled by NCLAT in the judgment of PR Director General versus Synergies Dure. The court held that tax dues are operational debt, and the court came to this conclusion based on the respective grounds. The first ground being the definition itself, which clearly includes a debt in respect of payment of dues arising under any law, and which is payable to the central government, state government, or any local authority. Apart from this, the second reason being that operational debts are usually understood as debts which arises during the operation of a company. So with regards to that definition, the court said that income tax, VAT, or any statutory dues are such which arises only when the company is operational. It does not arise when the company is not operational. Thereafter, there have been rulings, there have been judgments by the various courts and tribunals, wherein they have followed the NCLAT judgment and said that operational debt or tax dues are operational debt. Even recently, GST issued a circular wherein they stated that dues that pertain to the period prior to the commencement of CIRP
Akshay, your mic has gone into mute.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Did I miss something? Like, did you miss something?
No, you can just repeat the last two lines which you said.
Sure. Okay. So recently, GST issued a circular wherein the GST department, they clearly stated that dues pertaining to the period prior to the commencement of CIRP will be treated as operational debt. Therefore, in the light of the NCLAT judgment and the circular and various other judgments, it has been quite settled that tax dues are operational debt. But I have a question which still comes up in my, I have a question which is, can such definition be blanketly applied on tax? Because as we see, there are various types of taxes and they differ on the basis of their very nature. So can this definition be blanketly applied to all the taxes? Because I see indirect tax, or for matter direct tax. Indirect tax by its very nature is very different from direct tax. If you see the nature of the indirect tax, the tax itself is levied by the government on the end consumer. It is not levied on the vendor or the seller. The vendor or the seller is actually being entrusted the job to collect the tax on behalf of the government and give it back to the government. It is actually just done for the matter of convenience. And the name itself says, the indirect tax, the name itself says that it is a tax being collected indirectly from the seller or the vendor. This view has been affirmed by the High Court of Jharkhand. However, recently the Supreme Court overruled this judgment in the case of Ghanshyam Das, and the Supreme Court clearly they held that they cannot be basically they said that tax dues, be it indirect tax or direct tax, all such tax dues are a debt, are an operational debt. With regards to this very issue, even one more point which can be considered is, if you see the very nature of the indirect tax, it is more of a duty than a liability, because it is the it is the duty of the vendor to collect the tax from the consumer and give it back to the government. And debt and duty, if we see as per the dictionary meaning, legal meaning, debt and duty are different. They are not synonymous. Debt is basically a liability, while a duty is actually a legal obligation to perform. Here, in this situation, the vendor is performing a legal obligation. So I would say, in my opinion, though this is actually a moot question and this is subject to debate, though in my opinion, it is not a debt which is owed from the vendor. If any debt is owed, it is owed from the consumer. because the tax is levied on the consumer. It is not levied on the corporate debtor. So this question might be taken up by the court, any court, and they might just decide it. But until then, I think the NCLT or the NCLT, they can clearly draw a demarcation on the basis that if the vendor has collected the tax from the consumer and has not paid it back to the government, it is a debt which is due. Because if we see in that way, it will actually take the nature of a financial debt. Because any person, basically the vendor, he is using the tax collected from the consumer as his working capital, and which is not allowed. And if he's doing that, that takes the nature of a debt. However, if the vendor has not collected the tax from the consumer, he does not owe any debt to the government. With that, let's move towards the next subtopic, which is tax dues, which arise or which exist until the CIRP has been initiated. Now, the first issue that comes up is, what will happen to the such dues? They have not been recovered. Now, the question is whether such dues, they will cease to exist, they will extinguish, or whether the tax authorities have a right to recover. It has already been settled by the courts that tax is an operational debt. Therefore, tax authorities are operational creditors. Since tax authorities have been held to be operational creditors, they clearly have a right to submit the claim of the tax dues to the IRP or the liquidator within the time frame, that is 14 days. And after the dues have been submitted, they might be accepted. And if they're accepted, they might be disbursed as per the resolution plan or through liquidation. But it is important to note that such disbursement shall happen only on the basis of the priority set in the waterfall mechanism, wherein the government is being ranked 5th in terms of the priority. Now, my question is, if the tax authorities, maybe by any reason, they could not submit the claim within the stipulated time frame, do they lose the right, or do they have any right? See, there may be various situations. In this scenario, there may be various situations, such as if a tax authority, so when the CIRP is initiated, the IRP has to publish. Let's suppose IRP has to publish, and let's suppose IRP fails to publish or invite the claims, and due to that very reason, the tax authorities, they did not come to know about the CIRP, and they did not submit the claim. Now, the tax authorities, even if they did not submit the claim within the time frame, and if suppose thereafter they realize or they come to know that CIRP has been initiated, in that case, they do have a remedy. They do have a remedy to approach the NCLT under section 65C, wherein they can tell the court that due to the irregularity of the IRP, I could not submit the claim, and thereafter my claim should be adjudged. On the other hand, if the tax authorities, even despite knowing the fact that CIRP has been initiated, or pertaining to no irregularity from the IRP, basically they slept over their rights, in that case, there is no remedy. Because the courts have now and again held that IBC is a time IBC is follows a very strict timeline, and in order to pertain to that timeline, there can be no extension given. So if claims are not submitted within the time frame, they may stand rejected. Now, in that same situation, if the tax authorities even do not realize or come to the knowledge of whether that the CIRP has been initiated, even after the approval of resolution plan, at the time of approval of the resolution plan, and thereafter they realize or they come to the knowledge that resolution plan that CIRP had been initiated, and thereafter resolution plan had been approved. Now, if there is any irregularity from the side of IRP, then in that case, it is questionable, but there is a remedy under section 61. Under section 61(3)(2), it states that owing to any irregularity, due to any irregularity of the IRP, any aggrieved party has a right to approach the NCLAT against the resolution plan. But there are two questions which are still untested and undecided. The first being whether government authorities come under the purview of person, and thereby can they file appeals under section 61. Second, a person, since it has been laid by NCLAT in one of the judgments, wherein it laid down that any person who has not participated in the IRP, in the CIRP process, is not a part of, cannot be an aggrieved party and for the purpose of section 61. This brings us to the question that whether the tax authorities who did not submitted their claim and they could not, and thereby they did not participate in the CIRP process, can they be the aggrieved party? Hence, this question is undecided and untested and is open for question. Thereafter, if in the same scenario there was no irregularity of IRP, in the light of the recent Supreme Court judgment of Ghanshyam Das, it can be said, it can be concluded that there is no remedy. In my opinion, as per the judgment, there is no remedy in this scenario. But why so? Why in this scenario, the Supreme Court held that there is no remedy after the approval of the resolution plan? Let us examine the Supreme Court judgment in the case of Ghanshyam Das, wherein it's held that the resolution plan will be binding on all the stakeholders, irrespective of whether they filed their claims, they were a part of the resolution or not. The resolution plan will be binding on them. The first point or the first rationale which the court considered was the objective of the act. The first and foremost objective of the act is resolution. The the IB code was brought in existence for with the sole aim to revive the corporate debtor who is in distress and to maximize the assets which might get eroded after some point of time. And the way to achieve is resolution. So therefore, the sole objective of the code is resolution. However, if resolution plan has been approved and thereafter, if some stakeholder comes up and claims certain amount, being an operational debt or a financial debt, then in that case, resolution applicant will have no remedy. The whole objective will be defeated, because if that does not happen, then the resolution applicant who submitted claims who submitted the resolution plan on the basis of the details of the creditors, details of the amount which was claimed by the creditors and which was provided by the IRP. Based on those calculations, the resolution applicant submitted the resolution plan. However, if surprise claims sprung up after the approval of the resolution plan, the calculations would go haywire, and therefore the resolution will be unworkable. The whole objective of the Act is to provide a fresh slate to the resolution applicant. And that is the whole incentive for him to present a resolution plan. And if that itself is defeated, then the resolution will not succeed. It will completely be defeated. So considering these points, the Supreme Court came to the conclusion that the resolution plan has to be binding on all the stakeholders. But still, I'm curious, because tax authorities, can they be left remediless? Considering the situation, considering all the situations we discussed before, in all these situations, if suppose the tax authorities could not recover their dues, are they left remediless even after the approval of the resolution plan? Let us examine that. Let us examine where the scheme of the respective tax statutes, do they provide any remedy? Because if they provide any remedy, then another question that comes up is whether IBC would come in the way of these provisions, or whether such provisions are inconsistent with IBC. And thereafter, we need to analyze whether such right gets extinguished in the light of the Supreme Court judgment discussed recently. Yes, there is a remedy provided under the Income Tax Act and GST Act, which is section 179, which says that any tax which is not been recovered, which could not be recovered due to the gross neglect or fraudulent conduct of the or breach of duty of the director, in that case, director shall be jointly and severally liable for the payment. And the same provision has been enshrined under the GST Act. Now, we need to analyze whether IBC would come in the way of these provisions. High Court of Hyderabad, in the case of Leo Edibles, they held that section 178 of the IT Act. Before that, I would like to bring your attention towards section 178 of the IT Act. Section 178 of the IT Act says tax dues, basically it lays down priority of tax dues over any other dues of the SSC. But however, Section 178 has been amended by Section 247 of the Insolvency Code, wherein they have clearly stated, or it has been clearly stated, that operation of Section 178 is barred over the operation of Insolvency Code. Similarly, Supreme Court, in the case of Monnet Ispat, clearly laid down that the court will override anything inconsistent with the enactment, which is including the Income Tax Act. Similarly, NCLT Ahmedabad gave a similar ruling and said that Section 238 overrides the Gujarat GST Act and the CGST Act. Even NCLT Chennai held that with respect to GST, if there are any provisions that are in contravention of the IBC, IBC overrides such provisions. But it is pertinent to note in all these judgments that none of the courts have held that Section 179 of the IT Act or Section 88 and 89 of the GST Act do not hold action when it comes to IBC, or IBC or has upheld the supremacy of IBC over these sections. Therefore, these sections, we can say that it is untested before the courts. Also, we need to consider the fact that unlike Section 178, Section 179 and 88 and 89 of the GST Act does not bar its operation over IBC. So in the light of these facts, in my opinion, these provisions do not come in the way of IBC. But still, there is another question that prevails, is whether such provisions are in contravention of the provisions of IPC. Let's see. See, in order to examine such inconsistency, we need to first see the objective of the IBC. From the objective of the IBC, it is clearly established that IBC aims to provide and to basically protect resolution applicant or the corporate debtor. It aims to provide a fresh slate to the resolution applicant and protects corporate debtors from any liability. But from the objective, we could not draw any conclusion that directors of the CD are also protected under IBC. Therefore, IBC does not provide any protection to the directors of the corporate debtor. Similarly, if we see the legislative intent, the legislature clearly intended to lift the corporate wheel and treat the directors at fault separate from the corporate debtor, which is clearly evident from Section 32A of the code, which absolves the corporate debtor from its criminal liability, but it does not absolve the officer in default or any director from its criminal liability, which is also evident from the parliamentary proceedings, wherein Finance Minister, while he was discussing the 2019 Amendment Bill, he said that he recognized the individual tax liability, and he said that resolution applicants will not, the taxman will not come after these resolution applicants for the fault of the promoters. Promoters shall be dealt individually. So therefore, in the light of the objective and the legislative intent, in my opinion, we can conclude that these provisions do not contravene the provisions of the IBC. Because the whole IBC is protecting the CD or the resolution applicant, but not the directors. Now we need to see whether the Supreme Court judgments, does it put in any embargo on the rights under these provisions? See, as we already understood that the Supreme Court judgment was purely on the basis of the fact that resolution applicant should not be sprung with surprise claims and he should be provided a fresh slate. And further, corporate debtor should be provided protection from any liability. Therefore, it can be said that no extinguishment of liability can happen against the directors. Because the sole fact or the sole or basically the ratio based on which the judgment was based is the fact that protection has been provided to the resolution applicant or CD, but not the directors. Therefore, I would, in my opinion, these sections, the right under these sections is still available to the tax authorities, but still there may be a lot of legal questions that may arise, and that is still subject to question. There is another loophole which the tax authorities might use it to their advantage. Now, suppose there is a situation wherein the petition under Section 7 or Section 9 has been filed by any operational creditor, and the tax authorities come to the knowledge of it. Also, tax authorities, in a pending case, they have attached the property of a SSE. Now, when the property has been attached and the tax authorities have come to the knowledge that that a petition has been filed. Now, in that scenario, can tax authorities recover the tax dues from the property? Answer is yes, they can. And this is a loophole which can be used by the tax authorities to recover their dues as soon as they come to the knowledge that a petition has been filed. The legal backing behind is that though the corporate debtor takes control over the properties, though the attachment order does not have any effect over Section 36, because Section 36 clearly lays down that even the encumbered properties can be taken control over by the liquidator, which has been clearly held in the Leo Edibles case. Even despite these legal provisions, it is clear that moratorium only applies from the date of insolvency, from the date on which the CIRP has been admitted. So therefore, the period between the date on which the petition was filed until the CIRP was admitted, during that period, the tax authorities do have a right to recover the tax dues from the attached property, and there is no bar created by the code. The only bar is if the operational creditor comes to the knowledge that tax authorities is doing so, he may obtain a stay, an ad interim stay from the NCLT, and the NCLT might not hesitate to give it. Now, coming to the third subtopic of this presentation, which is tax dues which arise during the period of liquidation. Let's see what are the taxes which may arise during the liquidation. Under income tax, yes, if the assets are being sold under liquidation, then capital gains may arise. When these assets are being sold, the purchaser under section 194 1A will have a liability to deduct TDS at the rate 1%. Under GST, as we are aware that recently regulation 32A has allowed sale as a going concern during the period of liquidation. So if the company is sold as a going concern, then in that case there might be a GST liability. Similarly, even the sale of assets also may attract GST. Now the question that arises is with regards to the income tax, that whether these capital gains tax, the incidence of tax is the sale of these assets, that tax, whether it shall be recovered from the liquidator as a liquidation cost. NCLT Allahabad had the occasion to decide this issue, and they said no, such dues shall not be recovered from the liquidation cost, because though section 178 provides priority of tax dues, section 178, as we already learned previously, has been excluded by virtue of the amendment of subsection 6. Therefore, it shall be disbursed as per section 53, which means that the government, the IT department, will recover the capital gains arising within the liquidation period as per the waterfall mechanism, and there should be no priority given to the government with respect to such dues. Similarly, on similar lines, NCLT Delhi, in the case of Pooja Bahari versus Ghee Ispat Limited, they said that no, such dues shall not be recovered from the liquidation cost, but they gave a different reason, being that the secured creditors have an option under section 52 to either relinquish the property or either realize the value from the security they possess. Now, if suppose the secured creditor, he relinquishes the property, and when that property is sold, the capital gains tax is recovered from the liquidation cost. In that scenario, the secured creditor will receive, basically the corpus which is being collected will get reduced due to the capital gains tax. And after that reduction is when the secured creditor will receive the money. So basically, the amount which he is going to get will get reduced by the capital gains tax, which otherwise, if he realizes under SARFAESI Act, he will not have to pay the same amount, because SARFAESI Act exempts capital gains tax. So he will not have to incur any such tax. So in that case, what is the incentive for the secured creditor? There is no incentive for the secured creditor to relinquish the property. He can directly realize the property, realize the money without paying the capital gains tax. So therefore, considering this scenario, the court held that the recovery shall not be made from the liquidation cost. The government shall not take priority, and the government shall be disbursed with such dues as per section 53. The NCLT has laid down this law, but it is still subject to debate whether this ruling is correct in the eyes of law or not. Another question with regards to TDS is whether the department shall recover such TDS from the purchaser. Because considering the capital gains ruling, now the question is whether TDS can be recovered from the purchaser also or not. NCLT in the case of Om Prakash Agarwal, they said yes, you can recover from the IT department shall recover that 1% TDS from the purchaser. Because section 38 overriding effect is only applicable between creditor and the debtor, but not the creditor and the purchaser of the asset. And in this transaction, if we see, government is not a creditor at all. Because only when the government comes before the before the CIRP as a creditor, then section 53 is applicable and section 238 is applicable. If the government is not a creditor, how can these sections be applicable? And anyways, the sale price which the liquidator receives is after deduction of the TDS. Then why should this IT department should stand in the queue for realization of TDS? They should not become the creditor, no, when they've already realized that money from the purchaser. However, recently, when this case was appealed against before the NCLT overruled the judgment. They said no, it cannot be recovered from the purchaser because the nature of TDS is nothing but it is actually a tax. It is actually a capital gains tax which has been recovered through the purchaser. It is an advanced capital gains tax. So owing to that fact, they said that since it is an advanced capital gains tax, it should be treated as per the capital gains tax. And capital gains tax, as we learned in the previous slide, that should be disbursed as per section 53. Now we come to GST, whether the sale of a going concern or sale of the assets, whether even the GST department should recover as per section 53, or they have a priority over the debts or over the tax dues. With regards to sale of assets, there is an advance ruling by the West Bengal AR authority, which said that it shall be paid by the liquidator. Because the AR clearly ruled that the liquidator, as per the recent notifications and circular, has to obtain a separate registration. And when he obtains a separate registration, and during the CIRP process, whatever is being sold is a supply, and even the sale of assets as per the notification is considered a supply. So therefore, in the light of this fact, the West Bengal AR, they held that the liquidator shall be liable to pay. Now, with respect to the going concern, sale of the going concern, the notification, there has been earlier notification which has clearly laid down that going concern, being a supplier of service, does not attract any GST. So therefore, there would be no GST when the company is being sold as a going concern under the liquidation process. Now, coming to the last part of the presentation, which is very important and which has gone unnoticed by the courts, which is that When we examine section 31(1) of the code, we see that it clearly states that the resolution plan which is approved shall be binding on the stakeholders involved in the resolution plan. Now, this term involved in the resolution plan, if we go by the literal meaning clearly says anyone who is a part of the resolution plan is the one who is involved in the resolution plan. And even otherwise, there cannot be any other meaning which can be derived from this provision. It cannot be said that a person who is not a part of the resolution plan can also be said to be involved in the resolution plan. Now, if we see this provision, if we examine this provision in the light of the objective of the code and also in the light of the recent Supreme Court judgment, the objective of the code is starkly different. Because the objective of the code says that a fresh slate should be provided to the resolution applicant for the RP to succeed. But if you go and provide a fresh slate to the resolution applicant, and if you don't submit, if you don't accept claims which are not even submitted before the IRP, then in that case, there's a clear contravention within with the section of the code. So the claims which are not even submitted before the authorities, such claims, as if we go as per the section 31, it means that they are not a part of the resolution plan and they shall not be binding. But if we go as per the objective of the code, such claims gets extinguished, which is being laid by the Supreme Court in the recent ruling of Ghanshyam Das. So we see that there is a clear contradiction, clear inconsistency, and such inconsistency cannot prevail. And in order for the objective to prevail, such inconsistency has to be removed by the legislature. And until such inconsistency has been removed, the legislature, the literal interpretation of the section, in my opinion, should prevail. But again, there are plethora of questions and there are plethora of legal issues that will come regarding this inconsistency. And I feel that the courts, and I'm astonished that how the courts passed various judgments on the same scenario without even noticing this clear inconsistency. Because there may be a scenario where, this is the last possible scenario. There may be various other scenarios. This is the last possible scenario wherein the tax authorities could not submit their claims because the claims were unascertainable. Now let's take this example wherein the assessee, he self-assessed his tax liability, and he paid 5 lakhs as tax amount. Now thereafter, the assessment authorities, they felt something fishy and they opened the assessment and they thought that the tax amount is higher than what has been paid by the assessee. And thereafter, on that basis, they opened the assessment. But during the assessment period, the CIRP was initiated and the moratorium was applied. Now, based on this moratorium, the assessment would come to halt because it might lead to recovery to the assessee. Now, in this scenario, can the tax authorities claim the differential amount? No, they cannot. Because until the assessment is complete, the liability is not assessed. And until the liability is assessed, it cannot be ascertained how much amount of tax shall be recoverable. So this is the last possible scenario which one can think of. And in such scenario, if the tax authorities, they miss the bus, actually they do not miss the bus, they cannot, it is not possible for them to claim the amount in the CIRP. Do they lose the right completely? Even on the other hand, if we see a different scenario than this, the other scenario might be that the assessee is assessing a lower liability and the tax authorities are claiming a higher liability. And after the self-assessment of the assessee, the tax authorities, they pass the assessment order. And after the assessment order, the assessee, he filed the appeal. Now, if suppose that appeal is pending, in that scenario, the tax authorities can take the advantage of the CIRP, and they can claim the differential amount based on the appeal. Because in that scenario, it is ascertained. The liability is ascertained as per the appeal against the assessment order. And on that basis, they can use the backdoor entry. So something which they cannot do it directly, they use the backdoor entry to recover that amount. So that is actually a loophole which the tax authorities might just use it. But coming back to the situation where we are in, the inconsistency we are dealing with, I strongly feel that such inconsistency shall be dealt by the court, because it has gone unnoticed. It is only one of the judgments that is delivered by Jharkhand High Court in the case of Electro Steels, wherein they tried to address this issue and they upheld this the literal interpretation of the statute. But however, it has been overruled by the Supreme Court, but not category overruling this certain aspect. So therefore, I come to the end of the presentation. Now the floor is open to questions with regards to the issues which we have discussed right now.
Thank you, Akshay.
Prithvi?
Yes. Akshay, you can stop sharing the screen.
Yes, sure.
Okay, that was a really very elaborate and a wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
So many questions have been raised by you, and you try to give your opinion on a lot of unanswered questions. So I'm sure that there will be a lot of questions coming up from our participants also. So, and even they will have their views on the questions put forth. So,
Sure.
To all the participants, you can come forward and give your opinion, suggestions, or you can ask your questions also to Akshay.
I have just one observation. I think it's an excellent presentation by Akshay, because I was looking for something like a beginner, because I've not been dealing much with IBC, but definitely seeing some issues on the tax and IBC. I think it's very good and nice, simple presentation, so that people on the tax side also understand the importance of IBC. So congratulations on this excellent effort.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
The only observation I had was with reference to your talking about section 179 or section 88, 89 of the GST, whether they do not expressly bar IBC, therefore whether they'll be, yes, surely they are untested, but then the liability of the directors will arise only in certain specific situations. If that type of situation is attracted, then notwithstanding that no claim has been made to the resolution professional under that, yes. But if they are not willful defaulters in that sense of the term, then I don't think just you can leave the company and go after the directors unless and until the
absolutely correct, sir.
Yeah. Therefore, that's what the only observation I wanted to make. No, there are earlier, I think, some instances when the thing was totally new. the tax authorities had not made their requirements before the CIRP, and then they got lost. But now I think all of them are aware of the requirements, so that immediately once it goes into the resolution professional, they make their claims. But what you have stated with reference to certainly assessments which are pending or which are in appeal, etc., there how to make about that seems to be a problem. But if normally a company is taken over by another company, they will do the legal due diligence and take care of all these things either in the purchase price or anything like that. Whether such a mechanism could be built in for IRP, I think it remains to be seen, because the whole objective is quickly resolve the issue, allow somebody else to take over the assets and continue the business and do. That's the whole thing.
Yes.
Even that itself is getting delayed 9 months and all the 12 months, probably nothing is happening in many of those cases. We are seeing even in Jet Airways, there has been no resolution even till today. Of course, apart from there must be investors who are willing to do that. So I think on the tax side, I think it's an excellent presentation which you made. Made a lot of things clear. But yes, as always, as the things keep improving, maybe new issues could come. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Bhagat.
Akshay, it was a very good presentation.
Thank you.
I'm Aparna Nandakumar. See, one brilliant observation which you have made regarding the operational debt, that is whether the indirect tax could be, the dues could be operational debt, is a very good, observation. In fact, I have had occasion to deal with some cases when I was working as the department counsel. And I have often wondered why they have not been included in the committee of creditors. Because, the dues are so high, and, what happens is, just 1 minute. So what happens is, when they are not included in the committee of creditors, in fact, the department, suppose the matters, the NCLT proceedings are launched in, say, Bombay. There was an instance where the NCLT proceedings were launched in Bombay, and our department, that is the GST department in Chennai, came to know very late. And, they filed the Form B claim very late. In fact, after the resolution plan was, in fact, drawn up. So this kind of a situation will arise if they are not included as a financial creditor. That observation is very, very correct. It is a moot question which has to be pondered upon. That is one thing. Now, you were talking about the inconsistency about, the proceedings which are pending. Now, I have one, I differ from you. You said that assessments cannot go on once the moratorium is announced. See, there are judgments. In fact, I think APS has also appeared in one matter where I think he's appeared in one income tax matter following Delhi High Court. Our High Court has given a stay of the recovery alone. See, moratorium is only with respect to the recovery. The assessments can definitely go on. That is the view. That is also, in fact, that is what the interpretation has, has evolved. Therefore, for example, now let me take the example of a show cause notice. Now, when the resolution plan or when the resolution CIRP is appointed and Form B claim is given, show cause notice is the only document available. Now, the question arises whether assessment can go on so that, when during the assessment, there may be an occasion where an additional claim such as a penalty, in the show cause notice, the penalty would not have been quantified. But in the assessment order or the adjudication, the penalty would be quantified. Now, what happens to that? In my opinion, I may be right, I may be wrong. I mean, this is open to debate. In my opinion, that additional claim can be filed by the CRP before the CIRP, subject to the fact that the resolution plan has not been drawn up. Okay, that is my opinion, because the recovery alone can be stalled, the assessment proceedings cannot be stalled. That is what I wanted to express.
Ma'am, I totally agree.
You have any? Yeah.
Ma'am, I totally agree with you. So with regards to the moratorium of the tax proceedings, it has been a long drawn debate, and still the law has not been settled, because the general legal position that is pervading across the courts is that anything which results into recovery from the corporate data shall be stalled, and anything which results into recovery for the corporate data shall continue. But again, we come to the question is that if we consider the assessment proceedings, the assessee does not know, or even the IRP does not know whether it will result into recovery for or a recovery against. So it is.
Yes, you are right.
Yes. Yeah. So it is.
You're absolutely right on that, because the assessment order or the adjudication proceedings cannot be served on the assessee. It will have to be served on the CIRP, who takes the who gets substituted in the place of the assessee. That was a problem, definitely. You are right in that. You're right in that.
Correct. So I totally agree with you, ma'am, that regarding the moratorium on the tax proceedings, it is still not settled, and in assessment might continue, but in my opinion, it might not also continue. So that is still not settled. However, my point was that whether in the light of that inconsistency, what shall prevail? Because that inconsistency has to be removed.
Yes. There has to be some kind of a clarity on this issue. Absolutely. I don't have any doubt on that.
Because even a harmonious construction is not possible.
Yes. Unfortunately, since the department, the government dues are treated as operational creditors, they get a kind of a backseat treatment. That is the whole problem now.
Correct.
I think on this point, Natarajan sir has something to say. He's put up in the box. Natarajan sir, if you can join in and express
on this point, which Purna madam was saying, she was referring to one Delhi High Court judgment, which has also been followed by Madras bench. We have to see that. But what I feel, I may be wrong again, all proceedings are barred. Initiation of a suit or conduct of a suit or any proceeding. So it is not only recovery, even proceeding with the adjudication, giving a hearing, that also may not be possible during the moratorium. That's what I feel. Again, subject to verification.
Yes, it is open to debate. Certainly, it is open to debate. See, in fact, when I gave this opinion, I was the standing counsel for the department. Now I'm an assessee counsel, so I would like to concur with Natarajan's views. I really hope it is such.
Just one quick observation on what Madam Aparna was pointing on the indirect tax. But I think the issue is now settled by Ghanshyam Das Supreme Court. This indirect tax is also operational led, not so whether it is passed on to the ultimate customer, we are only a collector. Is that relevant anymore?
See, they have actually focused on the resolution plan more than the operational creditor, if I'm right. I think so. I'll also go through that judgment. Because they have that definition of operational creditor, I do not know whether that has been gone really into. The question that was before Supreme Court was whether the department can proceed on some dues which has not been formed, which is not formed part of the resolution plan, which has not been presented as a claim, whether that can be proceeded with after the resolution plan has been drawn up was the question, if I'm right. Because that was the question. That was the question before another judgment. I think Rajasthan High Court, Ultratech Cement Nathdwara. It's a very beautiful judgment that came before Supreme Court. So that's a very interesting case. In fact, there what has happened is the GST department had given a claim for, say, I think 1 crore or something, but then the resolution professional had reduced the claim. And in fact, they filed appeal and all that matter got settled. That amount was completely fructified. After that, for the balance claim, once the resolution plan was drawn and the second company had actually taken over, against the second company, that is a taken over company, the GST department had proceeded against for the balance claim. And writ petition was filed, and these were the observations that once the new company has been formed and has taken over, there is no question of recovery. Once the resolution plan has been drawn, there ends the matter. So, but as you say, the operational creditor, whether they are operational creditor or not, that particular term, I think, has not been gone into depth, if I'm right.
I
I
would,
mean,
sir, I would like to answer your question. Ma'am, with regards to that point, the court has actually blanketly dealt with tax. They have not gone into the nature of tax.
That's right.
What happens in a BAFR proceeding? You make a claim for unconfirmed demand. The department goes
So-
with a confirmed demand before the BAFR, if I'm right.
Sir, I'm not sure regarding the BIFR.
So it should
No, the
be.
BAFR only has been taken over
Yeah, it has been
by
taken over by
the
IBC.
BAFR proceedings. It has been taken over by IBC.
Oh,
So
Thank you, ma'am.
When that proceeding does not
can I add a
authorize
point?
a show cause notice, demand made in the show cause notice is not taken into account in those cases, if I'm right.
No, sir. Show cause notice demands have been brought into the Form B claim, sir. அப்படிதான் பண்ணிருக்காங்க.
Unless it is confirmed, it is in a notice state. So no quantified demand has emerged. That is
அது
In fact, very recently, it is in the case of Ruchi Soyas. Our Madras High Court, rendered by Justice C. Saravanan J.
Saravanan
has
J,
passed,
yes.
Yeah, he has said that this, whether it is an operational creditor or a corporate creditor, this issue has been left it open and been directed to be agitated before the NCLT. This was a judgment very recently rendered by Justice Saravanan in the end of April 2020, where Hemlata appeared for the department and Pushpa for the assessee.
Adila, I think
Led by
in
some-
that also the observation is there, no, that assessment proceedings can go on, only
something.
moratorium is
Yes.
applicable to recovery.
Yes, because these aspects has not been considered by even the Supreme Court judgment also. So that was a judgment on
Yes,
26th April 2021, where they have said that having not been dealt all these things, it's open to both the parties to approach the NCLT for appropriate clarification from the NCLT itself. It's in the case of Ruchi Soyas Industries Limited, in writ petition number 31090 of 2015.
What we are contesting, assessment can go on with a reference to Natarajan's question. So the moratorium means only recovery only. So you think of the old SICA Act, Sikh Industries Companies Act. So only the recovery is barred. So the assessment is a statutory duty. They are not instituting any fresh claim. So institution means by filing a suit or
Okay.
the case only, not the assessment. So the assessment
fact-
is statutorily completed. So by doing the assessment, the department is not making any demand. So
Yes.
only
Because-
recovery will be stayed because
Any assessment is also
suppose
with that time barring period is also been there. So just because of this insolvency proceeding, they cannot stop it with the assessment proceedings also. The time barring will get affected. No?
they say once the RP scheme is ineffective, the entire limitation is saved. That's what their defense. By saying that we will not lose our statutory limitation. But our argument is that the assessment has to go on. Only the
That's
section 14 of IBC is limited to recovery alone. Moratorium means recovery and not for completing the assessment.
Proceedings,
So the
regular
issue-
assessment proceedings. Yeah.
assessment. And also it includes appeal also. For filing statutory appeal like CMA and TC also, objection was raised by assessee. The case of Aircel on objection is raised, but the department got admission. By saying that appeal is no connection with moratorium at all, we have to file within time.
Who will
statutory
be
time
shown
limits
as
are
the
there.
respondents, sir? Who will be the respondents?
Company at that time, company was alive in the original name. The RP has now entered appearance and he filed a pleading. They are not making any recovery, but appeal has to be filed in time. We have
We'll move on to the next. Sagar sir wanted to add on something. After that, Maithili
The
ma'am is
process.
also in line.
Akash, the presentation was very good actually. It was very slow and I was able to understand even I was a layman in this entire subject. But I had a practical issue regarding one aspect. customs duty attachment was there when the moratorium was there. Whether on its own, whether a customs authority can lift the attachment if RP is appointed.
So as soon as yes, sir, sure.
Akshay, go on.
Yeah. Okay. So as soon as even so, the thing is, even in the case of Leo edibles, Andhra High Court has clearly held that attachment order does not create any encumbrance. So even though it has created encumbrance, it cannot be the property shall be in the taken in the control of the liquidator or the IRP, and he shall deal with it as per his requirement. So tax authorities, even though they have attached the property, they do not have any claim. They cannot have any claim of the property.
Thank you.
So tomorrow, like if they want to sell the property to recover the dues, it will not be possible, is it?
Yeah, after the CIRP has been initiated.
Okay. Thank you.
Even in the presentation,
I think in the Customs Act, the section itself has been amended so that
Yes.
the IBC has got a preponderance.
Yes.
142 though, sir. Vishwanathan sir, 142 and the section solunga.
142 only recovery. I just checked.
அதுல இருக்கும் பாருங்க, ஐபிசி பத்தி இருக்கும்.
ஆகாஷ், அந்த பிரசன்டேஷன்ல அந்த கேஸ்ல எல்லாம் கோட் பண்ணிருந்தீங்க, ரொம்ப நல்லா இருந்துச்சு. அந்த சைட்டேஷன் கொஞ்சம் கொடுத்திருந்தீங்கன்னா நல்லா இருக்கும் ஆக்சுவலா.
142A ல they made it as first charge.
140.
Liability under act to be first charge.
இல்ல சார், அமெண்ட்மென்ட் ஆயிருக்கு பாருங்க.
This is the latest book I am having.
அதுல படிங்களே, read it.
Notwithstanding anything in the contrary containing central acts or state act, any amount of duty, penalty, interest, or any other sum payable by the assessee or any other person under this act shall save otherwise provided in section 529A of the Customs Act, the recovery of debt due to banks and the Financial Institutions Act 1993, the Securitization and Reconstruction of Financial Assets and Enforcement of Security Interest Act, and the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code be the first charge of the property of the assessee or the person as the case may be.
Therefore, IBC la vandadunna, IBC will take preponderance. That is for section 142A6.
It says notwithstanding.
Double notwithstanding, sir. ஆரம்பிக்கும் போது ஒண்ணு IBC.
டபுள் வருமே. ரெண்டு வருமே சார்.
Yes, correct. Save others, save as otherwise provided.
Therefore,
so it is saved,
before IBC, it is not a first.
It is saved under IBC. Barring those 4 acts only, they get first charge.
They can, yes, that's what.
Probably banking recovery and all that they want to protect against banks recovery.
The financial creditor, banking.
Maithili ma'am. Maithili ma'am, you can unmute and you can ask your question. Maithili ma'am, I think she is not available.
She left. She must have left. She posted something in the group about the lecture and left. She has raised any question?
Probably if she joins later, we can still get.
Okay.
ஆகாஷ், அந்த பிரசன்டேஷன் நம்ம வாட்ஸ்அப் குரூப்ல போட்டுறீங்களா? நல்லா இருந்துச்சு பிரசன்டேஷன் வந்தது.
Akshay, you can share the presentation in our group.
Sure. I'll do that.
Even if possible, whether you can write the case law also, because you have told very relevant for each and every aspect actually.
All these are very practical points. I think all these things will be subject to a lot of disputes.
Yeah, it's a very important. It's a very important topic, and Akshay has done justice to it. Yes, it's a very important topic because it's a growing and a dynamic law.
Absolutely,
dynamism is there in this. Yes,
I'm back in the excellent presentation, Akshay. This is a question I would put not just to Akshay, but anybody else who has practical experience or observation on this. to say that because there is no recovery during the moratorium period and the assessments go on, then it is the proceedings as such don't get the kind of attention that they must from the company under liquidation. Do we not suffer on account of important legal issues not being decided properly at that stage because of lack of attention to it, the due attention, when you don't have the sword of recovery hanging over your head? Doesn't the law itself, the development of the law itself suffer, and it could have consequences for the successor company?
Yes, you are right, madam.
No.
Yes, right, madam. The question is, who will contest the assessment? Whether RP will be in a position to contest the case on behalf of the defaulter, as he has to look after the restructuring process. So it will be a burden on him to complete in the assessment and other. And once we say 15 days notice and time bound proceedings, then it will be a difficult exercise for him. So
Please, the time limit for completion of an assessment is also one of the major issues in Agility.
அது இன்கம் டாக்ஸ்ல
எல்லாமே வந்துருச்சு. இப்ப கஸ்டம்ஸ்லயே வந்துருச்சு இல்ல. Now they are fixing some time limit. Suppose time limit is running and the last 15 days la RP வர்றாரு, what he can do? The final stage la now RP is entering the assessment. So ex parte order that they will face. Well, that question, larger issue is there. We have to see.
Many issues are there.
Something must be done about it, because at one level, I mean, you may think there's a lot of unscrupulous elements will get away using provisions. That's the biggest problem. And in fact, my view is even our entire, the various Samadhan schemes of different descriptions, everything is heavily tilted towards the unscrupulous. I think it is because the unscrupulous make the laws. I think that's where we are at the end of the day.
Correct.
They
In
find
fact,
loopholes. Say they only. Yeah, that's the problem. The law is equal.
I will share one NCLAT order where what Maithili has just said about this unscrupulous elements escaping. I will share one order. It's a very interesting order. It's a very detailed order also. I'll try to share it in the group. You can go through that. It's a 172-page judgment. It's a very beautiful judgment where they've remanded the matter back. They have said that the resolution plan is not all right, and therefore the matter has been remanded back to the NCLT. It's a very nice judgment, and this particular observation which Maithili has just said has been made. It's a very interesting judgment.
Okay, thanks.
With due respect, it is not only the company which is involved. There is a quaternary.
Yes.
Without which it is not possible.
True.
That brings us to one more question. That is, even if suppose assessment proceedings continue, but if proceedings do not come to a conclusion before the approval of the resolution plan, it might not see the fate of recovering, right?
Yeah.
Oh, this was just going to be my next question. What if in such a scenario, the tax authorities don't go before the IRP in time?
Yes.
And time lapses. So what will be the consequence?
Government will lose the revenue.
Prithvi, I actually I was faced with a situation, very similar situation, just the one as you said. Now, long and short of it, I said, pesama surutti paranla potudungon sonnen. This is what I said. Nothing can be done. This is what I said. They even try to say section 88, but section 88 is applicable. Akshay, I wanted to make that observation. Section 88, I think it's I just went through once again, because when I wrote the opinion, I had gone through section 88. Section 88 applies only to private limited companies.
Correct.
If it's a public limited company, no remedy at all is there for the department.
Correct.
I think Hema ma'am also wants to join in. It will be more interesting on her.
We are only talking about assessment and what the department will do. I have one more further question inside this. Now, what happens to a poor purchasing assessee who will not be able to get the input tax credit just because the seller assessee has gone before IBC and the GST dues don't come into the resolution plan itself?
That's a brilliant point.
Very
Brilliant
good
point, Hema.
question.
Brilliant. Brilliant point.
We are thinking about the department and what about the assessee himself who is unable to.
Now the question is whether you have paid the tax on that goods along with the value. If you have
Sir,
not paid, you pay
the purchasing assessee has paid it to the vendor assessee. The vendor has gone into IPC and the GST dues don't come in the resolution plan itself.
Correct.
Now, what about the section in GST which says that unless the GST department has received the tax dues, the purchaser won't be able to take the ITC?
So recent
That
GRSA
issue is a very
judgment
important
is-
issue. Romba interesting issue that also is unresolved till date.
We are only thinking about assessment though.
Yes.
A lot of இல்ல ஹேமா நான் வந்து இந்த ஒப்பீனியன்ல எழுதுனால I am still thinking about the department from the department view, but நீ வந்து assessee view.
Madam,
We depend on all of you to think for us.
GRSA judgment may help. Recent judgment may help if you have paid.
now the department has to do the homework. When they decide to go before this committee, they have to make a plan or a table. What are all the show cause notices pending for adjudication? Adjudication is over, matter is pending before appeal. Appeal at various stages, and normally in GST, when they file the annual return only, the department will start the differential duty assessment, all these things. In the monthly payment, if they don't pay, then it will be a default, all this notice will be issued. But the question here is, if there is no return is filed and no adjudication is being taken, then what will happen to the debit? What will happen to the debt? So the department has to have the follow-up of various permutation combinations before going to the issue. That's what my suggestion, sir. Because appeals may be pending in Supreme Court, High Courts, and before Commissioner Appeals, before Joint Commissioner Appeals.
Sestat,
and not Sestat, the GST I'm telling you, not Sestat also.
GST,
yes.
All assessees going before the body is supposed to declare all this to them.
So where is the liability there? See, if they don't declare, what will happen?
My experience,
the responsibility is on the department.
The defaulting assessee goes before BFR. Department never knows that there is a proceeding before BFR. When they get the final order only, they come to know of it. There are situations like that. See, the officers are not aware of these proceedings at all. They have to be trained on it.
The limitation.
ரொம்ப கரெக்டா சொன்னேன் சார்.
The limitation,
sir, ரொம்ப கரெக்டா சொன்னேன். ஏன்னா the officers are not even trained. In fact, I had suggested when I told them you should have a separate wing for IBC. Income tax department la the madri irukku sonna. I don't know. I think Tema or somebody has to clarify that.
We have a department
GST la the mari kadai.
We have got a department called recovery. All unwanted people will be posted. They will come and go. No work will be done. After 10 years, 11 years, they will give a notice for recovery. Government revenue is at stake like that. What can you do?
Exactly. See, there are 150 கோடி 500 கோடி இதெல்லாம் என்ன public money இல்லையா?
And there
you can't allow these people to go scot free by going to the NCLT and saying that these are all operational creditors, resolution plan draw எடுத்து we don't have anything. அப்படியே you just
அவனை குளிப்பாட்டி அனுப்பிச்சிருவாங்க, nothing will come out. That's all.
ஆமா.
For a change, we are seeing here a lot of difficulties which are faced by the department than the assessees also.
That is advantage, because the assessees are taking advantage of that situation.
Exactly.
Definitely. So I think we've had a very elaborate discussion on this, and
because when we talk about the law, we should also know the practicality of that, so that you will understand the law better, put for the better case.
Absolutely. So any more questions or any more?
No, this will go on and on. I think we'll have to end it. It's a very, very interesting subject, actually.
Very interesting.
எனக்கு ரொம்ப பிடிச்ச subject.
Actually, one last point, that VAT company director being made responsible if he was in charge of the running of the company at the material time is a very important provision which has been brought into GST, which was not there in the excise service tax law and all that. And I think Akshay spoke about that also. Will the director get escape because they move into this particular forum? Is there a protection to the director, my dear boy?
No, there is no protection
Akshay?
under IBC. There is no protection because IBC clearly only protects the resolution applicant or the corporate data. It does not protect the directors or the individuals who are at fault.
But what happens to the recovery from their assets, their property?
Sorry, I did not get your question, sir.
The director's property is also amenable to attachment and recovery.
This is still subject to question. I am not sure whether the director's properties are attached to the CIRP process because
The law
provision
provides for that.
But I think the reason Supreme Court judgment makes directors also liable, no? Will that be applicable here? Such situation.
GST law, as you rightly pointed out, there's a provision for recovery from the director who was in charge of the company at the material time. If it is
just to answer Vishwanathan's point, that provision is only for, as Aparna Madam said, it is only for private limited. That too, if the directors are deliberately involved in that particular evasion, then it can be recovered. That provision will continue. That provision will continue. And as Prithvi pointed out, recently the Supreme Court has said the liability of the guarantor is totally different. Even though the company's settlement has come, for the remaining liability, the creditors can always proceed against the personal guarantors. So applying the same logic, if a director of a private limited company is involved in the evasion, there is no bar in proceeding against him. He can be proceeded.
It's a private limited company. Correct.
Misfeasance has to be proved.
Mr. Jitain had one. Sir, sorry, sir. Sir.
The misfeasance has to be proved merely because someone is director, his property cannot be attached.
No, first proceedings. Non-guilty is to be proved by him.
There complications irukku sir. Income tax department notice கொடுக்குது. Who has to prove அதெல்லாம் வருது. அதே இது RP கொடுத்தா அதுவும் வரும். He has to allege something. அவர் கொடுக்குற 6 மாசத்துல அவரால என்ன பண்ண முடியும்? அவர் கம்பெனியை முடிச்சிட்டு போயிடுறாங்க.
There was one question in the line with
எனக்கு தெரிஞ்ச ஒரு நரேஷ் ஐயர்னு ஒரு CIRP இருக்கார். அவர் தான் அந்த பெரிய மேட்டர்ஸ் நரேஷ் ஐயர் சம் ஐயர். அவர் வந்து கடகடன்னு முடிச்சிடுறாரு. அப்படியே ரெசல்யூஷன் பிளான் டப்புன்னு முடிஞ்சிடும். Some ஐயர் somebody price water ஏதோ ஒன்னு.
The last two questions which we will take up now.
Somebody raised a question regarding the attachment by customs. Who is that? Who was that? Sudhakara.
Sudhakar.
Sudhakar, I think he's left.
Attachment by customs arises in 2 stages. Whether for the past arrears as a recovery measure, attachment is under the defaulter recovery rules, or the goods yet to be cleared from the customs station, there will be attachment pending assessment. So there is a difference between the two. So recently one case is going before the NCLT where the goods are yet to be cleared from the customs station. The RP is claiming that I have priority. I think you hand over the goods, I will sell and appropriate. You come as a corporate debtor. The customs, I only appeared for the customs. Earlier it was handled by SR Sundar. Now I am handling. I objected by saying that goods are yet to be cleared. It is in the course of import stream. Unless you pay the duty, the goods cannot cross the customs station at all. So it cannot be your goods. If you want to take it as your goods, then you pay the duty and take the goods. So we are not obstructing your right to take the delivery. We are not saying the importer is something, the RP is something. This is not the good duty has to be assessed and cleared from the customs station in accordance with law. Of course, NCLT agreed with my submissions and the order is not passed in favor of the RP. The case is still pending.
This is not exactly attachment, sir. This is custody. Attachment is different from seizure. Seizure is different from custody.
Then the goods in the hands of customs station.
They are the custodian within their area, customs area.
At the end of the duty katlana, they will confiscate and sell the goods.
Yes.
Veera Raghavan sir and Jitain, 2 more questions will take up.
So I'm having a problem with my bandwidth, so I would not like to unmute my video.
No
Yeah,
problem.
so there was this one question which was asked by Mr. Vishwanathan regarding attachment of properties with the directors. So I think I am a colleague of Akshay, and we were discussing this, and we came across a particular regulation that actually says that the IRP, which is the Insolvency Resolution Professional, can actually move the NCLT if we find satisfactory material on record that says that the directors were responsible for siphoning off the money that was there in the company to their own personal assets. So I am not sure about the number of the regulation or under what regulation it actually comes under. So, but there is a provision that facilitates the IRP to do so.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Jiten, if you're still there.
Yes, yes.
Actually, I'm also a colleague of Akshay.
Okay.
Akshay, we are just discussing about a situation wherein tax authorities could not submit their claim within the stipulated time. And then they are aggrieved by that plan. Can they file an appeal under section 61 of IBC? Because somewhere we read that the provision says that any person, and the person does not include government.
Yes. So that is Jiten sir, that is subject to question and subject to debate, because still, as you say, that it is not it is still it says that any person does not include government entities.
Yes.
So now the question is that whether they can be a person under section 61 or not. So I think that's still subject to question, because that has not been settled till now. So until there is an undecided issue, I think one can not.
It's a small correction. It includes entities that are established under a particular statute, but does not include departments.
Yes,
so
correct.
Income tax or the GST department will not fall within the purview of definition of person. So that could actually lead to a problem.
Yeah.
Even if the tax department had participated in the COC process and they were not able to fully claim, and they had some problem with the resolution plan, their only course is go on an appeal. But whether they have the locus standi to file an appeal is something that we need to
So
ponder.
even if there are grounds for appeal, the department cannot go for an appeal.
Correct. That is pertaining to CIRP, but with respect to liquidation, they have a remedy under section 42.
Yes, but not under CIRP.
No, not under CIRP. That is still not not clear. It's undecided.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Akshay. I think this was a very interesting presentation, and especially the discussions which we had by all our seniors coming and giving their points of view was also very interesting. And I think it will be quite interesting to wait and watch how all the issues which were raised here, how they are going to take a look in the near future by the courts and what amendments will be made. So it was all.
Thank you, Prithvi. It was actually an honor for me to speak before such legal luminaries and senior advocates. And yes, definitely these issues are pervading within the tax departments, and it'll be very interesting to see how the court answers to these issues.
Yes. So thank you all the participants for joining today. We will be uploading this session in our YouTube channel along with the previous session also. So thanks once again for joining, and please stay safe and take care of yourselves. If for the upcoming sessions, we will inform it in the group. So thank you once again. Have a good day. Thank you. I'm ending the session.
Thank you, Prithvi.